Imagine you're at a high-stakes poker table, holding what feels like a royal flush. The pot is huge, the momentum is on your side, and you feel invincible. But instead of just taking the massive pile of chips waiting for you, you look the dealer in the eye and say, "Not enough." You demand more, a piece of the casino itself. For a moment, it feels like a power move. But then, the dealer calls your bluff. The cards you thought were unbeatable are just a handful of mismatched pictures, and that mountain of chips you were about to claim starts to shrink. That, in a nutshell, is the story of the WNBA Players Union and its high-stakes negotiation with the league. Fueled by a surge in popularity the sport has never seen, they believe they held all the cards. They made a revolutionary demand for a massive piece of the financial pie, a demand they felt was long overdue. To back it up, they had what they thought was an ace up their sleeve, a rival league, Unrivaled, meant to prove they didn't need the WNBA. But that backup plan didn't just stumble, its second season opened to deeply disappointing ratings. Their bluff was called in the most public way imaginable, and in the blink of an eye, their power, their leverage, and their revolutionary demands started to look like a massive overreach. This isn't just a story about a contract negotiation. It's a story of how a group of athletes at the peak of their power misread the table, overplayed their hand, and may have fumbled a golden opportunity. They went for the kill shot, convinced they were unstoppable. With the media on their side and a new generation of fans packing arenas, they looked at the exploding revenue and decided it was time to cash in. They were ready to go to war if they didn't get their way, convinced the owners had no choice but to surrender. But they made a catastrophic miscalculation. They forgot that leverage isn't just about how strong you think you are. It's about how strong your opponent knows you are. And when their secret weapon was exposed as a dud, the game changed. To understand how it all went sideways, you first have to appreciate just how right everything was going. The 2024 and 2025 seasons were a renaissance for the WNBA. The league wasn't just growing, it was exploding. The main catalyst, of course, was the Caitlin Clark effect. It was a real, quantifiable phenomenon. Her jersey sold out almost instantly. Everywhere the Indiana Fever played, arenas were packed and ticket prices surged. But it wasn't just Clark. A new class of rookies like Angel Reese and Cameron Brink brought huge followings, creating new rivalries and storylines that captivated fans. Social media engagement went through the roof, and for the first time in its nearly 30-year history, the WNBA wasn't just surviving, it was a hot commodity, and the players felt that momentum. They were the product after all. So when the Players Union, the WNBA, opted out of their collective bargaining agreement in October 2024, it felt like a declaration of power. With all this new money pouring in from a multi-billion-dollar media rights deal set to kick in for 2026, they decided it was time for a revolutionary payday. Their core demand was audacious. They didn't just want a raise, they wanted to flip the entire system. The union's proposal, submitted around Christmas of 2025, called for players to receive a 30% share of the league's gross revenue. Let's be clear, that's the total money coming in before a single expense is paid. Before the lights are turned on, before charter flights are booked, the players wanted nearly a third of it. This proposal would have caused the team's salary cap to jump to a reported $10.5 million. To many, this was about fairness. Players in major men's leagues get a revenue share somewhere around 50%. WNBA star Kelsey Plum famously said, "We're not asking to get paid what the men get paid. We're asking to get paid the same percentage of revenue shared." It's a powerful argument. Armed with this moral high ground and the league's success, the players prepared for a fight. In December, they voted with a near-unanimous voice to authorize a strike if necessary. They drew their line in the sand, 30% of the gross, or they'd walk. They were confident the owners, terrified of losing their golden goose, would have no choice but to cave. They had the momentum, they had the public narrative, and they thought they had a secret weapon, a plan B called Unrivaled. Every great negotiation needs a credible threat. It's the or else that gives your demands teeth. For the WNBPA, that threat was supposed to be Unrivaled, a 3-on-3 basketball league launched to run during the WNBA offseason. The idea was simple: give players a domestic alternative to playing overseas, and show the WNBA owners that the players had other options. If the WNBA wouldn't pay up, maybe another league would. The league's masterminds were none other than Breanna Stewart and Napheesa Collier, two of the WNBA's biggest stars who also served as vice presidents on the WNBPA's executive committee. It was a bold power move. The first season of Unrivaled in 2025 showed some promise. The opening night doubleheader reportedly pulled in around 312,000 viewers, and the season averaged a respectable 221,000 viewers on TNT. The championship game peaked with a reported 385,000 viewers. It wasn't setting the world on fire, but it was a solid start. It was proof of concept. The players went into the CBA talks feeling like they held a real threat. The narrative was simple: see what we can build on our own. Now pay up or we'll put all our energy into this. But then came Season 2 in the winter of 2026, and the house of cards began to wobble. The drop-off was steep. The season opener, a source of pride the year before, was a sign of trouble. Reports indicated the opening games averaged just 175,000 viewers on TNT. Some games on the sister channel True TV were an outright disaster, with one broadcast reportedly drawing a minuscule 32,000 viewers. That's barely a blip on the radar. By the second week of January, some games were reportedly pulling in just 139,000 or even 71,000 viewers. Unrivaled CEO Alex Bazell, who is also Nafisa Collier's husband, pointed to tough competition from the NFL playoffs and said leagues aren't built overnight. But the league knew about football when it made the schedule. The hard reality was that the initial curiosity had faded, and the product wasn't holding a big enough audience. The most damning insight came from one of its own founders, Breanna Stewart, when asked about the ratings, gave a painfully honest answer. Stars drive ratings, and the biggest stars weren't there. Caitlin Clark, the very player driving the WNBA's boom, had no part in Unrivaled. Anya Wilson, the dominant force for the Las Vegas Aces, was also absent. Superstars like Sabrina Ionescu and emerging fan favorites like Angel Reese weren't playing either. This was the fatal flaw in the players' strategy. Unrivaled proved the exact opposite of what they intended. It showed that fans are primarily loyal to specific, transcendent stars, not just the idea of women's basketball. The very player who gave the WNBA the confidence to make their bold demands, Caitlin Clark, was also the one whose absence exposed their backup plan as a hollow threat. The WNBA owners could now look at the disappointing Unrivaled ratings and see the truth. The players needed the WNBA platform far more than the WNBA needed a handful of its veterans. The bluff had been called. The or else was no longer a thriving rival league. It was the threat of playing in front of 32,000 people on a secondary cable channel. The leverage had crumbled. In the middle of this high-stakes poker game stood Breanna Stewart and Nafisa Collier, two figures seemingly playing for both sides. As decorated champions and league MVPs, their voices carry immense weight. As vice presidents of the WNBA Executive Committee, they were supposed to represent every player in the league during its most important CBA negotiation ever. And as the co-founders of Unrivaled, they were entrepreneurs building a direct competitor to their own league. This wasn't just a side hustle. It was a glaring conflict of interest that ultimately complicated their entire position. On one hand, their union role demanded a single focus: get the best possible deal from the WNBA. On the other, their Unrivaled role required them to promote it as a better alternative. Every interview hyping Unrivaled was an implicit knock against the WNBA. Nafisa Collier even said on a TNT broadcast, "Being on this side with Unrivaled, I know what it takes to run a sustainable business," a clear message to the WNBA commissioner. The subtext: we're executives now, and we're building our own thing. When Unrivaled's future seemed bright, this might have looked like a genius move. It was aggressive and embodied player empowerment. But when the viewership numbers for Season 2 came in low, the strategy backfired. The conflict of interest became a symbol of a flawed strategy. How could union leadership negotiate effectively with the WNBA when their leverage was struggling to draw a big TV audience? Imagine the scene from the owner's perspective. The people demanding 30% of gross revenue were the same people whose alternative business was proving just how valuable the WNBA platform really is. The threat was no longer as credible. This created a cloud of cynicism. Was the push for a strike really about the good of all players, or was it a tactic to create chaos that might benefit Unrivaled? Was the hardline stance a serious proposal, or a gambit designed to fail, allowing them to claim the WNBA was being unreasonable and push players toward their own league? The irony is thick. In their attempt to prove they could build a better system, Stewart and Collier inadvertently gave the owners a perfect exhibit for why the players' most extreme demands might be unsustainable. They gambled that they could be both labor and management, partner and competitor. In doing so, they lost credibility on both fronts, leaving their negotiating position in a tough spot. End result with Unrivaled failing to provide the needed leverage. The WNBPA's aggressive strategy hit a wall. The final deadline of January 9th, 2026, came and went with no new deal. But instead of panic from the owners, the league just went quiet. The result was a cold, silent stalemate. Both sides agreed to a moratorium that froze all league business, including free agency. Teams couldn't sign players, and players couldn't negotiate contracts. The entire offseason, a critical time for building rosters and fan excitement, was put on ice. This also put expansion plans on hold, leaving new franchises in Toronto and Portland in limbo, unable to build their inaugural teams through an expansion draft. Amid this chaos, details of the WNBA's offer began to leak, and it painted a complex picture. The proposal was reportedly transformative, even if it wasn't the 30% of gross revenue the union demanded. The offer included a structure that would give players a share of the net revenue profits after expenses, said to be in excess of 70%. The core of the dispute is gross versus net. The union rightfully argued that a net revenue deal could be manipulated, with owners inflating expenses to minimize profits in the players' share. However, the salary figures attached to the league's offer were huge. Reports indicated the league's offer would raise the max base salary from around $250,000 to $1 million in 2026, with the potential to hit $1.3 million with revenue sharing. The average salary would reportedly jump from about $120,000 to over $530,000 in the first year alone. The minimum salary would see a massive leap from around $67,000 to approximately $200,000. But with Unrivaled stumble fresh in everyone's minds, rejecting such a massive pay increase started to look like a major miscalculation. The public narrative, once firmly on their side, began to shift. Then, in a shrewd business-as-usual move, the WNBA simply released the 2026 schedule in late January. The message was clear: the league was moving forward, with or without a new CBA in that moment. The stalemate was now working in the owners' favor. Every day that passed put more pressure on the players. The chaos they had threatened was here, but it seemed to be burning them more than the owners. At its heart, this conflict is about two very different views of the WNBA's financial reality. The players see exploding revenue and believe their share should explode with it. They look at the Caitlin Clark effect and a new multi-billion-dollar media deal as proof the league is flush with cash. The old broke narrative seems like a convenient lie to suppress salaries, especially when reports suggest players currently get a share as low as 9.3% of revenue. However, the league and some financial analysts paint a more complex picture. For most of its 30-year history, the WNBA hasn't been profitable. It has been an investment largely subsidized by the NBA. While recent growth is real, it doesn't instantly erase decades of losses or the high costs of running a pro sports league. Commissioner Kathy Engelbert has consistently maintained that the league is not yet profitable. The league reportedly projected that the union's demand for 30% of gross revenue would lead to $700 million in losses over the life of the deal. This is the core of the owners' resistance. A gross revenue share makes them responsible for 100% of the costs, while giving away 30% of the income before those costs are even paid. Think of it like a lemonade stand. You bring in $100 gross revenue, your lemons and cups cost $80. Leaving a $20 profit net revenue. The player's proposal is to take $30, 30% of gross, leaving you with $70 to cover $80 in costs. A $10 loss. The league's proposal is to give players a big share of the net, say 70% of the $20 profit, which is $14. In that model, both sides want to keep costs down and profits up. In the player's model, only the owner bears the risk. The owners argue their proposal makes the players true partners. As profits grow, player salaries would skyrocket. The offer to raise the average salary to over $500,000 was their tangible bet on that shared future. But the players' union remains deeply skeptical, fearing net revenue can be manipulated through creative accounting. This mistrust is the poison in the negotiations. However, their leverage to force the issue was tied to Unrivaled, which proved not to be the threat they needed. They made a demand based on the rosiest possible interpretation of the numbers, while their weakened leverage left them unable to effectively challenge the owner's more cautious financial assessment. Just as the smoke was clearing from the Unrivaled situation, another mysterious force emerged: a global women's basketball league codenamed Project B. While Unrivaled was a domestic, off-season 3-on-3 league, Project B presents a potentially more disruptive. Scheduled to launch in late 2026, Project B is planned as an international circuit, but what really turned heads was the money. Reports began to circulate about staggering seven-figure salaries and, even more enticingly, equity for the player. The league's funding has been linked to Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund, the same fund that has aggressively moved into golf and soccer, though a co-founder has clarified that a PF-owned company is an event partner rather than a direct investor. Regardless of the source, the money appeared to be real. And then came the bombshell in November 2025. The first player to officially sign with Project B was Nneka Ogwumike, the 8-time All-Star and, most critically, the president of the WNBA Players Association. The move was stunning. The person leading the CBA fight against the WNBA had just signed a lucrative deal with a potential rival. The conflict of interest was immediate and obvious. How could Ogwumike negotiate in good faith for the future of the WNBA when she had already secured her own with an outside entity? She framed it as maximizing her earnings in a short career, but the timing was incredibly problematic. Unlike Unrivaled, Project B isn't a direct leverage play in the current CBA talks. Its launch is too far off, but it's a huge long-term wildcard. If it delivers on its promises, it could create a real talent drain from the WNBA. The WNBA's current offer of a $1.3 million max salary, a massive improvement, might not look as good next to the potential multi-million-dollar deals from Project. This puts the WNBA in a tricky position. Do they dismiss Project B as another unproven venture, or do they take the threat seriously and adjust their offer? For now, the threat is distant, but the signing of the WNBPA's own president gives it a legitimacy Unrivaled never had. It looms over the current stalemate not as leverage for the union, but as a potential escape hatch for individual stars, complicating the entire landscape of women's pro basketball. The story of the WNBA's 2025-2026 labor dispute is a classic cautionary tale of miscalculation. Standing on a mountain of newfound popularity, the players' union believed it held an invincible hand. Their demand for 30% of gross revenue was the ultimate power play, backed by a strike vote and what they saw as their ace in the hole, the Unrivaled League. But their grand strategy was built on a shaky foundation. The Unrivaled League, their main source of leverage, failed to deliver the threatening viewership numbers they needed, proving fans are loyal to superstars like Caitlin Clark, not just a generic brand of basketball. This public stumble badly damaged their bargaining power. Compounding the error was the conflict of interest at the heart of their own leadership. With the WNBPA's vice presidents founding the struggling Unrivaled League and its president signing with a mysterious new venture, their unified front began to look like a mess of competing interests. In the face of this, the WNBA owners played it cool. They put a reported transformative offer on the table, one that would have made their players among the highest-paid female athletes in team sports, and then simply released the league schedule when it was rejected. The resulting stalemate has hurt the league, but it has arguably hurt the players' negotiating position far more. But strategically, they may have lost a once-in-a-generation opportunity. They had the leverage to secure a landmark agreement. Instead, they overplayed their hand so badly they are now backed into a corner. The revolutionary demands have fizzled. The conversation is no longer about a 30% gross revenue share. It's about how to salvage a deal from a position of weakness. The choice ahead is stark. Do they swallow their pride and accept a deal that looks a lot like the one they already rejected? Or do they dig in for a prolonged fight that could alienate fans and stall the league's incredible momentum? They held a winning hand and tried to take the whole casino. Now they're left staring at their cards, wondering how it all went so sideways. What do you think? Was this a righteous fight for what they deserve, or a strategic blunder of epic proportions? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.